If you're brand new to all this and you've never attended a church like this, you might be like, if we act like that, they may think we're one of those crazy charismatic churches or something. Newsflash, we are one of those crazy charismatic churches, but they might think that about us. Or if you just are like, I don't know why anybody would sing like that. I mean, I can understand it at a Chris Stapleton concert, but I just don't understand why you would sing out loud like that. I just want to tell you that we've got a story to tell. And the reason that we've got to get loud is because Jesus got loud over our sin when he died. And so we're praying for you that you're going to experience that one day. But until then, you can just watch us, and you'll see that people don't act like that unless they're changed. And so I wanted to tell you that. Y'all can have a seat, by the way. I might make you stand the whole sermon. That'd be fun. Might get some amens and some preach pastors if we do that. I don't know. It might happen. Hey, I want to start with a story today just to kind of give you an insight on where the rest of our time is going to come from. Because one of my greatest fears as a pastor, and one of the things I'm always trying to fight against, is that you would ever believe in any way that I am the hero of the story that I'm trying to tell, because I am not the hero of the story. Jesus is the hero. I am the one in need of saving. And so I want to always make sure that you know I'm fighting with you. I'm fighting with you. I'm fighting the battles with you. I needed the saving just like you. And so though I may get up here to teach all of us, it is because God has taught me first. And so I wanted to give you some perspective. Connie and I started dating when we were 16 and 17 years old. And we got married when we were 20 and 21. And we were full of knowledge and wisdom and all things about how to be married, as you can attest to if you've been 20 and 21 before. And so we got into this whole thing called marriage, and when we did that, we didn't really get a whole lot of counsel, just to be honest. Like, it's why one of our passions, Connie, is as a church, we do premarital counseling, we do pre-engagement counseling, we do marriage counseling, because we just think there's a lot of wisdom out there to be had by people who have walked through a lot of things, and we don't have to pay. I call it dumb tax. Like, I've already paid some dumb tax in my life. I don't need you to pay it too, so I can help you not to pay some of the same dumb tax that I had to pay. And so we didn't have a lot of that. We got into marriage, and we finished up college and lived on our college campus for the last semester. When we first got married, and Connie was working a couple of jobs while still going to school. I was working a couple jobs while still going to school, but we didn't have much of anything and didn't have anything to even think we should have anything. And so we kind of just live life that way. You know, you've all been there before, where you didn't even realize how poor you were until you kind of stepped back from it, and that's where we were. But we had a great first semester and everything, but then we moved to North Carolina for me to be able to go to college, or me to be able to go to seminary, rather. And when we did that, Connie had graduated from dental hygiene school, and so she got her first sort of big girl job, got a real 40-hour-a-week job, making some good money, and man, some money started to come into the account, and no one had taught us at all how to handle that, like what to do with that. So we were like, man, we got some funds. We need to have some fun. Like, funds equals fun, right? And so before you know it, what have we done? What does everybody do? We got a couple free T-shirts, and what I mean by that is we got a couple of credit cards. And so, you know, they give you that free T-shirt. They don't tell you how much that shirt costs. It ain't free, I can tell you that. So we got a couple of free T-shirts and got a couple of credit cards. We went and got a car, a brand new car. I mean, what does a 21 and 20-year-old with only one job in the whole family need but a brand new car? So we got one of those, and we needed somewhere to live. We were living with some friends when we first moved to North Carolina who were very generous to us and let us live with them, but we're like, hey, we can't do this for very long. And, you know, rather than sort of go shop the apartment scene, we were like, hey, all of our friends in seminary here look like a lot of them got houses and stuff, so let's get us a house. And our parents have a house, and our friends back home have houses. And so we went and bought a house, and it was a new-to-us house, and you know, we got into that. And the house was cool, but it was a good starter home, and looking back on it, it was really good. But when we got into it, of course, we were like, man, this isn't as nice as we'd like it to be. So we started doing some additions to it, some repair to it, adding some furniture and different things, more furniture than we had when we moved in. And of course, all of this is, you know, bought on the promise that one day we're going to pay it off, because we're just putting it on furniture, home rooms to go credit card, and, you know, Home Depot. So I show up one day. This is a true story. So one day, you know, Connie is going away for a day and a half, almost 2 days, to this women's conference that she was going to with some ladies in our church. And she had mentioned a couple of times she wanted this French doors put in. She had mentioned that. And then I really hated the carpet that was in our home. I just didn't like it. I wanted hardwoods in the home. So I was like, oh, while Connie's home, I'm going to surprise her, and I'm going to go to Home Depot, and I'm going to tell them I need 1,400 square foot worth of hardwood floors, and rent me a power gun, or whatever they call it, nail gun deal. And they had to teach me how to use it. I didn't even know how to use it. I had to sign a waiver saying if I shot it in my foot that I wouldn't sue them or whatever. And so then I go and I'm like, I'm going to do this all in the day and a half that she's gone. No problem, right? So I found out a couple things. Number one, I didn't know what I was doing. That was the first thing. And so it took a while to get the hardwood floors going right. I never finished the hardwood floors actually in that house. We sold it with a room that was like a quarter of the way not done with hardwood floors. We just were like, hey, buy it as is or not. I'm not doing any more hardwood floors. And then on the one project, I ripped the wall out where the one single door was to get out the back to put in these French doors. And what I didn't know what a loading wall was or a load-bearing wall was. I had no idea what that was. Turns out that was one. That was a load-bearing wall. And so that was not fun. And so rip that out. It's raining sideways into the house when Connie gets home. A big hole in the back of our home, and hardwood started on easily less than 5% of the house. Carpet ripped up out of the yard. And she walks in, and I'm like, welcome home. Yeah. Do you love it? Do you love it? So, but I say all that to say we were chasing stuff. And in chasing stuff, we ended up piling up some debt, some amazing amount of debt in our 20s. I really don't even remember exactly how much it was, but I know it was in the range of $50,000 of credit card debt, Home Depot debt, all this kind of stuff that we had just boom, 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 boom. And so we got about a year or two into marriage, and we're like, hey, what in the world? We don't even know what we bought. We don't even know what we did. We already sold that house and got out of it, so we don't have that anymore. And at that, that was just crazy. So we then had to use the next 3 to 5 years, I think it was. Connie would work 6 days a week cleaning teeth, and I got a couple of jobs while I was in seminary, and we just worked and worked and worked to try to pay that off because we realized that was a bad place to be. When you realize you are spending way more than you make, and you're accumulating debt that, by the way, I don't know, some of you may be young enough that you don't know this yet. It's a lesson that you learn in life. You don't really know it early on. I understand. It's understandable. You have to pay credit cards back. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we didn't. We were like, somebody's just going to pay this off in the end, right? We didn't think that, but we thought that. I don't know what we thought. And so, we were just racking it up, and we realized this is not a good place to be. We don't want to be in this place. And the reason we had got there is because stuff had become perverted in our lives. And we're in this series called Perverted Stuff, and we've been looking at how God has a perfect way, and he has a way that he wants to do things, but we have ended up perverting it all over the place. And remember, the word perverted simply means this: having been altered from its original course, meaning, or state, to a distortion or corruption of what was first intended. And we talked in week 1 about what was first intended, right? That God has a plan for the world, and his plan is the best plan. But then we went off course. And Proverbs 14:12 tells us that there is a path before each person that seems right. It seems right to put down hardwood floors. It seemed right to get in over our heads in a car and a house and all the eating out and everything that we were doing. It seemed right in the time. It felt really good. It seems right, but ends in death. And so in this series so far, we talked about our sex lives. And we said, hey, God's got a perfect will for our lives overall, and a part of that is our sex lives. And yet our sex lives have become very perverted. There's a lot of perversion when it comes to sex around us in the world, and we talked honestly about that. Last week, we talked about how perverted our speech can get, that we don't know the language of heaven sometimes, of how we are supposed to speak life, and so we just naturally kind of speak death. And by the way, did Connie not do an incredible job of preaching last weekend, talking about life, and it was incredible. I told her, I was like, this is your sermon to preach. You live this out, do an incredible job at it, and I was so proud of her last week. And then, so this weekend, I just want to give you a chance to kind of catch your breath, make it a really easy subject. We're just going to kind of talk about how you spend your money. No big deal, right? Hobbies, toys that we buy, all the stuff that we have in our lives. We're just going to talk about perverted stuff. If your toes have not been stepped on so far, between the way you talk, your sex lives, or the beautiful plan that God has for your life, fully money back guarantee. If you don't get your toes stepped on today, you can come and talk to me. All right. So here's the deal. Satan's goal with our stuff is to take something that God made perfect and pervert it. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to take something that God made perfect and he wants to pervert it. But let me start with something a little bit freeing, because I know how it is. I am a professionally trained pastor, so I know what you're thinking right now. I know what you're thinking. You're just like, oh man, pastor's gonna come after my boat today. He's gonna come after my house today. He's gonna come after the fact that I gotta feel guilty because I do a good job and make good money today. I'm not gonna do that. I actually am really glad that you make good money. I think that you probably work really hard to do that. I actually think that if you live life the way that God wants you to live, I'm not gonna come after your hobbies. I'm not gonna come after your stuff. I just wanna make sure you know the parameters that all that stuff need to be lived in so that they won't get perverted. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make you feel guilty today. I'm not going to do. There may be conviction from Holy Spirit, but it won't be from me, because I know that stuff is good stuff when it is used as God stuff. Like when we have stuff and it is used as God stuff, like God honoring stuff, God's purpose is carried out with it, it becomes really, really better stuff in that way. So I'm not after your hobbies as bad today. I'm not going to try to make you feel like that, or after your things. In fact, I'm not actually going to be after anything today, because I don't have a right to be after anything in your life. It's God who's going to come after something in my life and in your life. And so I hope we'll all be opened up to Holy Spirit speaking us, because what Jesus is really after is our heart. He's after our hearts. And so if he is after our hearts, I want to make sure that we are able to give him our hearts. Now, remember in Scripture that when the Bible talks about the heart, it's not talking about that muscle that's beating in your chest right now. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the seat of emotion, or the combination of the soul, the spirit, the body. It's our essence, our being. When the Scripture speaks of the heart, it's talking about who you really are. And so what Jesus wants to see changed in all of us today is who we really are. No matter how old you are, how long you've been walking with God, he wants to change something in you today to make you more like him in the essence of who you are. And so when we know what the heart really means, that puts verses that we'll read in just a second in context in Scripture a little bit more, and it makes us understand what the Bible is trying to say, and even what Jesus is trying to say when he talks about the heart sometimes. So like Psalm 51:10, David says, "Create in me a clean heart." He's not talking about getting an angioplasty, all right? He's not talking about rooting out the valves in the heart and stuff. He's talking about creating me a clean soul, like who I am, oh God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. He's saying, so this part of me that doesn't want to be loyal to you, God, I want you to clean that. I want you to renew that. And when I'm more like you, I will be more loyal to you. And so he says that. Ezekiel 36:26. Says, and I will give you a new heart. This isn't talking about a heart transplant. So I'm going to give you a new heart, a new essence, a new soul of who you are. And I'll put a new spirit. It really defines it there. I'll put a new spirit in you. I will take out your stony, stubborn heart. That part of you that wants to be selfish, that part of you that wants to be unloving, that part of you that doesn't want to speak life, that part of you that wants to have perversion in your sex life. I'm going to take that out of you, and I'm going to put in a new tender, responsive heart to God. I want to make you tender and responsive to what God wants to say to you. Then Jesus said things like this. Matthew 5:8. Jesus said, God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. And so there is a blessing that comes out of a heart that is pure and running towards God. And I would say that is in all parts of our life, but that blessing also comes financially. It also comes in the stuff that we have in our lives. God blesses those whose hearts are pure. When you come from a place of going, I want this to be God stuff, not just good stuff. And then Matthew 15:18-20 says this, but the words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. He says there's something inside of you that comes out of you. There's something in your being that comes out of you that defiles you. For from the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you. Eating with unwashed hands will never defile you. They were talking about the religious law that had existed for the Jewish people. And one of the things they said is if you don't wash your hands, and get them clean before you eat, that will defile you spiritually. And what Jesus is saying is, hey, if you don't wash your hands, it may defile your body. Like you might get sick and get a virus probably, but you will not spiritually be defiled. It is what is already inside of you, your heart, your essence, who you are, that defiles you from the inside out. And then in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus gives us this, which is going to kind of be our focal passage for the weekend. And he talks about the heart. He says, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal them. Store up your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. And then he tells us why. Why do we want to do that? Because wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. He says, wherever you let your heart go with your stuff, your heart, your soul, your essence will follow. It will follow your stuff. And I noticed in this verse too, it's very telling about what Jesus was saying. He talks about not storing it up, right? He says, hey, don't store up for yourselves. But he doesn't say don't use for other people. So he's talking about, hey, don't kind of take all of your things inwardly to yourself, but instead, how could you have a life that is giving to others? It's not storing up, but it's saying, how can I use this for God? So if our treasure, or at least where we choose to use our treasure, how we choose to spend it, what we buy with it, the stuff we have in our lives, if it is an indicator of who or what we have given our hearts to, then I think that we can begin to see why that would matter and why we would need to preach on it. And then also, if we look at some statistics about our world that we live in now, that are, I think, very surprising but telling to who we are as a people, and I think most of them will apply to most of us, it begins to show us that we do have a problem. Look at some statistics just about stuff in our country right now. First statistic, there are 300,000, everybody say 300,000. 300,000 items in the average American home. 300,000 items. That is incredible. Now, that points to the second statistic that I want to tell you. The average size of the American home has nearly tripled in size over the past 50 years. Now, I want to go back. I'm not against the size of your home. Not against the size of your home. I don't care if you have a 5,000 square foot home or 7,000 square foot home or 1,000 square foot home. Jesus is looking at something else, but it tells us something. We have 300,000 items, and we have our homes keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger so that we can hold all of those items. But they're not big enough. Homes aren't big enough because in the United States, we have upward of 50,000 storage facilities in the United States. In fact, right near our church facility where we are meeting live right now, there are 2 storage facilities that you can see from our parking lot that have both been built in the last 2 or 3 years. Within a very short driving distance down this main road called Cypress Garden right here, you can get to another storage facility. So right around us, there are 3 storage facilities. In fact, there are, listen to this, this should tell you something. There are 5 times more storage facilities in the United States than there are Starbucks. That should open your eyes, right? Then this statistic blew my mind. So if you took every single human being, woman, man, child, everybody in the United States, they would all get 7.3 square feet to stand in and could all stand in and under the roof of a storage facility in our country all at the same time. Every human wouldn't even need a home. They could just stand underneath the roof of a storage facility that we all own to put all of our stuff in that can't fit in our homes that already have more than 300,000 items in them. Should tell us something. Why is that the case? Well, 3.1% of the world's children are in the United States. Only 3% of the world's children are in the United States, and yet over 40% of the toys bought are owned by children in the United States. And some of you now are going, yes, about 5% of those are at my house, like at my house. And those little crumb crunchers will not clean them up ever. And so they're all over the place. And so you know that it's true. Here's another one. The average American woman owns 30 outfits. That's one for every single day of the month. Some people have said the average Freedom Church pastor owns 50 or 60 pair of shoes, but that's a lie. I don't know. It might be. It's probably true. All right. So in 1930, the figure was 9. So in 1930, the average woman had 9 outfits. Right now, the average woman owns at least average woman owns 30 outfits. And then this is really telling to this. So even with that in mind, the average American throws away, not to Goodwill, not to hand-me-downs, the average American throws away 65 pounds of clothes every single year, which is incredible. All right, this one really hit home for me. I got 2 left, and then we'll get off of this depressing information. But over the course of our lifetime, we will spend a total of 3,680 hours. That's 153 days. That is nearly half a year. Searching for misplaced stuff. Just walking around going, Connie, where'd you put my keys? And she's like, I haven't touched your keys. Why would I move your keys? And I'm like, well, somebody did. She's like, probably you. And then I find them in the most random places that I decided to sit them down. And so it's the average 9 items a day that the average American has to look for that they have lost. They're like, I don't know where it is. I can't find it. And they spend that time. Over the course of a lifetime, we will look for 198,743 items in our lifetime, spending nearly half a year looking for phone, keys, sunglasses, paperwork, whatever it may be, all right? I lost my car one time. Honestly, lost my car one time. Didn't know where it was. Couldn't remember where I parked it. Didn't even know. It took me more time than I'm willing to admit that I lost my car. All right, that's a whole nother thing. All right, Americans spend, listen to this, $1.2 trillion annually. Say trillion. You don't even know what a trillion is. Like, you can't even comprehend it. You've thought sometimes, you've dreamed about what could it be like if I was a millionaire. You don't even really think about billionaire, and trillionaire is not even on the radar. Like, not even on the radar for Jeff Bezos yet. Like, it's not even there. So it's like, you're just like, man, trillions and trillions of dollars. $1.2 trillion annually on non-essential goods. In other words, stuff we don't even need. Don't even need it, but we buy it because it's on the end cap. And hey, we might want to try it out. Saw it on an infomercial, looked like it was pretty good. So we just buy it. So now, I know this is depressing. I want to move on. But I want it to set kind of a bar for what we're going through. And I know we're going to get through and are getting over this whole COVID thing. And I know that probably the influenza will kind of poke its ugly head up again. But I am thinking that our affluence is starting to cause some infection to our soul when I read through this. In fact, there's a term out there that they've coined that's affluenza. Affluence is causing an infection to my soul. It is a virus that is running rampant in all of us, and we all have let it run rampant in our soul. And listen, again, I just want to say it again because I know Satan is going to try to get you to check out of this sermon because you're going to go, I'm not going to sit here and listen to how I shouldn't have what I have, and I'm not going to sit here and listen about if I work hard, I shouldn't be able to buy stuff. I am not against our affluence at all. I feel very blessed to live in America in 2021. I mean, we got indoor plumbing, guys. Come on, shout out to indoor plumbing. Just be glad. I am glad of when God chose to have me be born. I'm glad I'm in 2021. I am not going to be coming up with some hashtag, first world problem memes to make you feel bad and telling you, oh, you shouldn't be hashtag blessed, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to do any of that because I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love who we are. I just believe that with who we are, we need to understand whose we are. And if we understand whose we are, we'll understand how to use what we have. And so I think we can see through all these statistics and everything that there's a problem. And I think that for most of us, we understand why there is a problem. We have affluence. If you live in America, you are affluent, by the way. I know that we have a different bar in America of what we call affluent and not. But if you look at the whole of the world, you sitting in Freedom Church are very affluent according to the whole of the world. And so our affluence combined with the influence that we give other people and marketers in our lives to tell us what we need to have, is what's causing this problem. Because marketers, some of you are in sales, you know this to be true, marketers want to sell you more things because they don't make any money off of the old things that they sold you that you decide to make last a long time. That's not how the world works. People make money off of you needing the latest, newest thing. And so, because of that, we change the decor in our homes because Chip and Joanna told us to, right? How many, let's just be real. Come on, we're going to get real practical today. You're like, white walls and farmhouse decor is so spring 2021, y'all. The aesthetic is not happening anymore for me. If you have not painted an accent wall black yet, are you really the decorating influencer on Instagram that you're trying to tell everybody you are? If you don't have a black accent wall, Joanna doesn't even want to know what you're doing. She's just like, what are you doing? Black knives, black forks, black spoons. You got to have it all. And so we see all of this and we go after it. And if I haven't gone after the guys yet, maybe you're like sitting there feeling kind of prideful. How can you live with yourself if your boat can't float in any less than 6 inches? If you don't have the draft down to like 4 inches, like what are you even doing? You need to get the latest one, right? You need to get the latest boat. Or, how can you kill Bambi if you don't have a high-powered rifle with red dot scope? The rifle's $300, but all the stuff I'm going to add to it, I'm going to shoot from a deer stand, probably heated, from a heated deer stand from about 200 yards away with a red dot scope, a $3,000 rifle. I'm going to shoot Bambi in the face. That's what I'm going to do. And so I got to have that gun to do that, baby. You just don't know. And so we upgrade and we upgrade and we upgrade. I asked him, I said, how much does a rifle cost? He goes, it's kind of relative. Depends on how many toys you get to go on the rifle, with the rifle. The rifle can go from 300 to 3,000 really, really quickly. And so, and just in case you're not thinking that I'm being fair to myself, this week, I have to tell you, when the Jordan Retro 5s shattered backboards came out and dropped, I was like, I need those Retro 5s. I need them. How can I preach effectively if I don't have those new Retro 5s to preach in? They make me walk on water, I need those Retro 5s. Jesus said, beautiful are the feet who bring the gospel. It's my life verse. So I was trying to convince myself of a need this week, and I didn't get them because I felt convicted because I was doing this sermon. I'll get over it in a couple weeks. But if I kept going on, I could hit everybody. Maybe you hadn't painted an accent wall. Maybe the house isn't your thing. Maybe you don't hunt, you don't fish, whatever. Maybe you don't like shoes. But there's something that I would begin to be meddling if I started to talk about in your life. And you all know what that is. So then, let's go back to Jesus and what he has to say. He said, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Store up your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. He's talking about storing it up. What do we store up? What do we keep all to ourselves? How do we handle the stuff we have? And really what Jesus, I feel like, is pointing out in this verse is that it's sort of obvious to Jesus, but maybe not so obvious to us all the time, is that all of this stuff is temporary. Like he's like, rust destroys it, moths eat it up, and hey, it's nice and hang it on your wall and paint those walls, but if you got any kids, they're going to mess them up in like 4 hours anyway. And so do all that stuff. Like that is great. Get the boat, go fishing, do all the things. But I think Jesus, I don't think he's as concerned about how many pair of sandals that his friends own and whether he's going to pick up the newest, latest ones when they drop, I think he's more concerned about what are you doing with your heart? And what are you doing with the stuff? And do you have the correct perspective of the stuff in your life? So Jesus wants to make sure that our hearts are good. He wants to make sure that there is nothing that would make us have a separation between obeying him. That there's nothing that we would worship more than him. That he is literally the Lord of our lives. And if our stuff gets in the way, then it can begin to show us that he is not the Lord of our lives. And that's what he wants us to look at. So here is just some very practical ways, real practical. You should write these down and you should process these. You should really think about these, and you should talk about these with people that you're friends with and in your family and in your small group together. And here it is. Are you master of your stuff, or is your stuff master over you? That's the question for this weekend. We're going to look at some practical ways to figure that out. I'm going to give you some more questions to ask, but that's the real question. Am I the master over my things, or are my things the master over me? Let me give you some guidelines that I think will help you figure that out. The first one is, does anything you have keep you from being generous? Generosity is one of the greatest indicators of your relationship with God. Where are you at with God? Because I have never met someone that is stingy and greedy and keeps everything to themselves that is walking also in lockstep with God. In fact, when I meet someone that I go, oh, I want to be like them. I want to live my life like them. I want to have a marriage like them. I want to have children like them. I want my life to look like theirs. I never get in and go, oh, man, whew, they're stingy, really good. I can be stingy too. No, I get in and go, they are the most generous people that I've ever met. And so you have to ask yourself, does anything that I have keep me from being generous to others? And here's what I know in the church. The church is really guilty of doing this. And I think some of you have been caught in this sometimes. We're very guilty of going, okay, generosity is what we're talking about. That means rich people, bad, poor people, good. Poor people are following God. Rich people aren't following God. And here's what I'll tell you. I've been around in life and ministry long enough to tell you. I have met some very wealthy people who are super generous and following after God and in lockstep with God in their lives. And I have met some very poor people who are very generous, lockstep, walking with God, give from what they have, like widow's mite type generosity, and this are willing to give it. I have also met some poor people who are the stingiest people in the world. And what they do have, they hold it to themselves and would not be generous with anybody. And I've met some rich people who are super stingy and keep everything to themselves and just hold it all tight and don't let go of anything, really tight-fisted with everything that they have. And so it's not about how much you have. It is about what you do with what you have. It's not even about how much stuff you have. If you're like, man, I don't have 30 outfits, Pastor, I got like 70. It's not even about that. I don't want you to get caught up in that. My question is what are you doing with the other stuff? What are you doing with that stuff? What are you doing with the heart issue that's going on within you? And you can tell that. Here's how you answer that is, are you generous? Are you generous? Because generosity is, a generous spirit is a difference maker. And a generous spirit comes from practice. You have to practice being generous to get better at generosity. Because the first time that you part with something that is not yours, it may not feel natural. That is yours, rather. It may not feel natural. When you're like giving away something that is yours and you're holding it tight, it's like it doesn't feel natural. And here's the thing with our culture. Anything that doesn't feel natural, I would say makes us feel uncomfortable. We're like, yeah, that's not for me. That's not for me. I mean, this relationship makes me uncomfortable. So, I mean, I'm going to have to, actually work to be friends with this person, and I'm about to put up with some idiosyncrasies that they have. So this isn't for me. I'm going to go find somebody that makes my life comfortable. This marriage isn't for me. I mean, if they were my soulmate, they would make me feel comfortable in everything that I do. And so they just must not be my soulmate because they don't make me feel comfortable. And so anything that feels slightly uncomfortable to do, we're like, that can't be God's will for my life because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And yet, so when we go to be generous and we're like, God, okay, I really feel like you're calling me to give this away and to be generous with this part of my life. And it just feels like, it's very uncomfortable to give this away. And I worked for it and all those kind of things. And it doesn't feel right. That's normal. Why? Why is that normal for you to feel uncomfortable at first with being generous? Because you're not born generous. Have you ever been around a 2-year-old? You're not born generous. What's one of the first words that they'll start to learn? Mine. Mine. They don't own anything. They can't even wipe their own butt. Right? They don't own anything. They can't feed themselves. They can't do anything. And they're like, that's mine, mine. You're like, you don't have anything. I have to feed you. And yet they instinctively think, this is mine. Why is that way? And why are there a lot of 40, 50, 60, 20-year-olds still going, mine? Mine. Lots of them walking up to people going, money, money. Right? So you just like, they want more, they want more. Why? Because there is a path before each person that seems right. But in the end, it ends in death. Like, so we're always, one of the things we learned in the first week, we are walking towards death a lot in our lives. What did Connie talk about last weekend? In our speech, we're drawn towards death. In our sexuality, we are drawn towards death. In our stuff, we are drawn towards the easy thing in generosity. It's not easy, but it's great. It's great because it makes us more like Jesus. And so we start to practice that. And I know another thing, again, because I know what you're thinking, because I think it too. And some of you are like, man, generosity, what are you talking about? I worked hard for this stuff that I have. Why should I have to give it to somebody else? I mean, they don't even work. They're just waiting for the next stimulus check. Won't even get a job. Can't even hire anybody anymore because nobody wants to work. Why should I be generous with my stuff? I earned it. Oh, did you? Think back on your life just a little bit. Who was generous to you that gave you your first break? Who was generous to you that business that you were setting up, they taught you how to do that trade? Who was generous to you? Here's all you really have to do. If you have any self-awareness whatsoever, and listen, I know self-awareness, if we could catch that like we can catch a virus, it would be so much better, right? We need some self-awareness in our world. But if you're at all self-aware, you know you faked your way through that first interview that you got hired for your first job. Like, you know you didn't, they were like, do you have this experience? Can you do this? Or you feel comfortable with that? Absolutely. I'm gonna be the greatest employee you ever. And then you walked and were like, I got to go figure out what that even is. I don't even know. Not only do I not know how to do it, I don't even know what an actuary table is. I don't even know. I'm gonna go Google that and find out what it is. And so you didn't deserve that first job. You didn't. And then if you're just super prideful, you're not self-aware, you're not willing to give anybody credit for giving you some good stuff in life and getting you a break. Can I just go back? What did you do in utero to be as smart as you are? What did you do when you were in your mother's womb to decide to be 6 foot tall, clean cut, jaw, handsome, that can talk people into buying anything? Like, what did you do in utero to be just really smart and understand money? Nothing. You don't have anything to do with anything. You were made by God, and He gave you everything that you are. Just the very fact that you can take a breath right now is a gift from God. So if you're not willing to give anybody else credit, at least give Him credit. Right? And so you didn't earn anything to begin with. Now, I want to say, I know that there are some of you who have earned it in some ways. You've worked hard. You got better at doing what you do. You were good and honest in your business. You saved like you were supposed to so that you could go out and start your own business. You could take the promotion. You could take the job that didn't pay as much and work your way up, and you've done a good job. And I applaud you for that, and now you have some stuff. And I'm not against you having some stuff. I'm just saying, are you being generous more to others than you are to yourself? See, being generous only to yourself is called selfishness. And I know you're like, oh, he's talking about tithing. He's talking about tithing. And I am in some ways. Generosity starts with bringing and returning to God 10%. He gives you everything. We just established that, and you clapped for it, so I hope you believe it. And then you just say, God says, well, then will you just give me back 10% and you can keep 90? That's the greatest deal, by the way, that's ever been brokered in the history of the world. And so He's like, I gave you everything, but you just give me back 10%. I'm not talking about that, because I want to be real for just a minute. That's just called obedience. That's not called generosity. Like, you're not being generous when you give God what He has required that you return to Him. That's just being obedient. I'm talking about a different level of obedience. A level of obedience where you go, I want to be generous with others more than I am myself. I want to be generous with others in some things that really matter in my life. I want to be sacrificially generous with my time, my talent, my treasure. And so let me get really practical, like digging down just a little bit deeper. Say, dig, Pastor. Just tell him, say, dig, Pastor. All right, you gave me permission, so when it hurts, that's just what it is. Your tools, your house, your clothes, your boat or boats, your vehicles. So I'm not just talking about the tithe. Or do those things that I just mentioned, have such a hold on us that the thought of letting someone borrow your tools that are nicely organized in your garage right now, and you have got them polished and they are just amazingly there, and your neighbor never returns them, like ever. And if they does return them, he doesn't return the right ones. He returns somebody else's tools that he's borrowed, thinking that they're yours, and you're just like, no, I'm not going to do that because I worked hard for those tools. I own those tools. Or are you generous with that kind of stuff? I remember Rick Warren saying one time, and Rick Warren's a pastor in California, Saddleback Church, wrote one of the best-selling books of all time, The Purpose-Driven Life. And he said, I don't understand why Christians own so many tools. I don't understand why Christians, he said, own so many lawnmowers. Why does every single believer need to own a lawnmower? Couldn't we use our funds better? That's part of that $1.3 trillion probably, is buying a zero-turn when your neighbor's already got one. Why does everybody need to have it? He said, why couldn't we just truly be the community that Acts points out that's like, hey, you share with each other, and you share your talents, and somebody else shares their talents, and somebody else shares some stuff they've gotten, and so we share with one another. And so I put this into practice all the time. My neighbor Chris can tell you, I borrow all of his tools all the time. And so I don't own anything. I'm like, you got one of these? He's like, yeah. I'm like, praise God for you being my neighbor. It's amazing. How about this? Your house. Beautiful house. Love it. If you've got a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square foot house, I love it. You know why? Because your house can hold a lot of people for small group. I mean, a lot. So you ought to be hosting a couple different groups going on, all in it stuff going on. But what if for your house, you're like, well, I like to keep it clean. If I invite people over, they make it dirty. So I don't really share it with anybody. I finally got it decorated just like I want. Took some Instagram pictures, shared it that way. That's enough sharing for me. I don't need anybody to come over and mess up my carpet. My carpet's wonderful. I invite kids over to my house. Have you met kids? I don't think so. So the question is not how big your house is. The question really is how big your heart is. I really don't care. I love it when people get all uptight in the Christian world about, did you see they have this house? I'm like, I don't care. What are they doing with it? You can be in an 800 square foot apartment and be the selfish person I've ever met in my life. Or you can be in an 8,000 square foot house and be sharing it with people in a way that changes lives and impacts people. And God will say, man, maybe you need a 10,000 square foot house. You got a whole lot of people coming over and living with you and being with you and just life and community happening. So it's not about that. Or what about outfits? Why does everybody need the special outfit for the outing and the event? Can we get real? Well, I want people to know it's mine. And if she wears that first, they might think I borrowed it from her. Gosh, it got quiet. If she scuffs up my shoes, or if he scuffs, I guess I could say if he scuffs up my shoes, right? It's just a heart. I don't let anybody borrow anything because I got to convince the world I'm the only one rich enough to have it. I got to convince the world that they can't possibly have what I have, and I certainly don't want them to think that they're wearing it first. And so it's just the heart. We let people borrow things. And they might scuff my boat. They might ding up my car if I let them while they're down to one car for a while. Hey, borrow my car when you need it. Drive my truck when you need to go pick up some stuff. I've got one. You don't need to have a truck too, right? And so it's just the heart. It's true generosity. The level of your generosity, listen, is an inverse indicator of how much things may have become an idol to you. So as much as you are willing to open up your hands and give it away, shows how much you're willing to give it away on behalf of God, and how closely you hold it to your chest shows how much it's become an idol to you. So there's nothing wrong with having things. It's just if you're going to be generous first, and generous first to God first, and saying, God, how can you use this stuff in a way that is honoring to you? Here's another way that you can tell if you are the master, if the stuff is the master. This is going to hit hard for some people. But I want you to process it, and I want you to really ask, how could this change my life if I live this out? Do you have to work more than is healthy? Overtime shift after overtime shift after overtime shift. Yeah, I'll take the overtime, And spend more than you have. Swipe the credit card, because we got to have that. to have the stuff that you have. So does it not allow you to be generous is one thing, but are you having to work more than is healthy, not spending time with your kids, with your family, not spending time doing things, serving in the church, giving away your time and talent and treasure, and are you having to do all that, and are you getting in debt to be able to do it? Statistics, if they're right, would say that if I were to cut the room right down this aisle right here, about this many of you are not in debt. The rest of you are. And if I were to take a few steps over, about this many of you still are spending more money than you make. Some of you got some savings, got into some money somehow, but you're still spending more than you make. And so most of us in this room are struggling with this in some way. Debt to cover our identity, to cover whatever it is we need to look like, we need to have the stuff gets us into debt. And so we want to help you as a church. And here's the deal. I'm not going to help you in my time allotted today with that. It's going to take some time. It took 3 to 5 years and a lot of counsel for Connie and I to figure out how to really manage money and get out of debt in our 20s. And so what we want to tell you about is that we have a course that we offer here called I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. And we want to let you know we're going to start a brand new one that's going to be fresh. It's going on right now, but we don't want you to have to jump into that. We want you to start a brand new one on November the 1st, Monday, November the 1st, brand new month, brand new course, and you can figure out how to live your life in a God-honoring way with your finances, and you can do it with a group of people. And hey, if all of you sign up, we'll make room for you, all right? We'll find one of you that's got 8,000 square foot house, and we will have a group there. All right, so we'll make room for you, and we'll have it here at the church, and we will be good to go. So I want you to do that. And then also, I want you to know we offer financial encouragement. And so we have financial encouragement at the church, couples that would love to encourage you in your finances, help you set up a budget, help you live by it, just encourage you of how you can do that. So one of those 2 steps, you could go to the help desk, and they can help you with getting out of debt, because debt is weighing you down. You're having to work too much, and you're not generous because of it. And newsflash, no one may have told you this yet, but you're also not happy. And the people around you know it. Working all the overtimes. Your family knows it. Your friends know that the debt has got you stressed out and you're not fun to be around. And so we all want to tell you, let God fix it. Let God fix it. Do something about it. And because I can't tell you how many people have told me that they can't be generous. And as I start to talk to them, I'm like, oh, you got a boat payment. You got 2 car payments. You got a house you can't afford. You got a credit card payment. You buy all these clothes. It's not that you can't be generous. You just haven't figured out how to be generous yet. And then I know, too, there's a group of sort of right now very prideful, self-righteous people who are sitting here, and you're like, I'm not in debt. Not in debt. I tithe. I'm not in debt, and I tithe. But you're not really generous. And the reason is because you're convinced that you've got to put every bit of money that you make into your 401k. And because one day you're going to get to live the life that you want to live. Can I just tell you, you just reversed it. You're not worshiping stuff now. You're worshiping the stuff that you're going to have later. And so you're not generous to anyone around you. You're really only generous to yourself because you're the one who is made to feel really confident in having all of that money in your retirement. Now listen, we live 10-10-80. We preach 10-10-80. Actually 15-10-75. Go up on the amount that you give away in generosity. But that 10% of savings is important. We love it. You should save. You ought to save. Most of the country doesn't have any money in savings. That is wrong. The Bible teaches to save. But some of you aren't generous to anybody around you because you're saving so much, because that's where you get your confidence from. And your security and your confidence needs to come from obeying God and not from how much you can put in your 401k. So be generous to your spouse. One of the greatest marriage lessons I ever learned, and when I really learned how to be a better husband, and I say this and people always laugh when I say it. You can laugh. It sounds funny. It's the greatest thing I ever learned. My money is not my money. Her money is not my money. Her money and my money and her money is her money. I knew you'd laugh, but I mean it. I only make money to serve God first and then serve her next. And then beyond that, serve some others alongside each other. So get the manicure, get the pedicure, get the things that bring joy. Like, I just want to tell you, you're not any fun. You're not any fun to be around. So you were like sitting there self-righteous about, yeah, that guy's got debt. He's all stressed out. You're stressed out over the 401k. You're stressed out about being able to retire at 55. You don't need to retire at 55. Find something to do with your life that you love. Pour into it. If your goal right now is to get to sit on a beach at 55 and never do anything else, come meet with me, because I've got some things you could do for the kingdom of God, that you could be like my friend Wayne at 70 going, hey, let's take some more hills together. Let's conquer some more things together. Let's go out and do some things together and reach people for Jesus together. There's a lot more to be done than that. So that's enough. I'm off my soapbox. That was free for this service. Somebody needed to hear that, because that was free. You got it free of charge. You don't even have to pay me for it. All right. So now, last question. Does your stuff help or hurt your God-given purpose in life? We just talked about your purpose. Does your stuff, the things you have, if you have a boat, taking people out on it, and building relationships, and helping people, you can have the house. So we've talked about, does it help your God-given purpose in life? Everything we have, time, talent, and treasure, our time, our talent, our treasure, is to be used for God. It's supposed to accomplish something. So I want to end by just telling you about my friend Brian. So I've got a friend, his name's Brian. He lives in Montana. And Brian was in ministry, was on staff at a church, doing great, amazing job, doing student ministry in a church in Billings. And he was success. He was winning. And he's actually one of those guys that has a Midas touch. Like, they just win at everything they do. And he's just really good at ministry, was doing good. But he knew his soul was not good. And so he, along with prayer with his wife, just decided, I need to step away from ministry, because ministry's hard, y'all. You're usually dealing with people at like a really bad time in their life, maybe even the worst version of them when you're dealing with them. And so it's tough. It's difficult. And he had found that it was very tough for him. And so he said, I'm going to step away from ministry for a while. He still served in his church. He stayed in his church. It's his house. And so he stayed in that house. He still served, but he just took a step away from ministry. He said, I know I can make money, because he's really good at making money. He had made money before ministry, and he was going to make money. So he opened up a coffee shop. And with that Midas touch, that coffee shop was successful. So he opened up another coffee shop, and another and another. I think it got to 4 or 5 coffee shops, just rocking and rolling. And to a point where he was like, hey, I basically have passive income now. People running the joint now. And he had a lot of time. He had a lot of talent. And now he had a lot of treasure, a lot of finances that he could do something with. And so he prayed and he asked God. He's like, what can I do? And immediately his mind came to his darkest season in his life when he was burning out. And so he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to call some of my friends that I know are in ministry, that I know are going through similar type of situation, and I'm going to invite them to Montana. And I'm going to invite them to spend some time with me. And we're going to take them, I'm going to hire some guides, and we're going to go fly fishing together on the Bighorn River. And I'll rent some Airbnbs, and we'll stay at some nice places, and I'll just give them a week to just refresh. And so he did it with his money, his time, his talent, right? So those guys came in, and they loved it. Of course, they went back and told other people and other pastors. And before long, people were calling Brian, and they're like, hey, Brian, you gonna do one of those trips to Montana again for guys? Because if you are, I might know somebody like me. I might know somebody. And so we invited another 15 in, and soon another 15. Before long, he was having to look for a place because they just couldn't find enough Airbnbs. And so found a place that he could house people at, and found a place he could rent. And then that place got too small, and he had to move to another place. And so they bought a place, and now he had to split the week, and he's bringing people at the first part of the week and the second part of the week, and he's got 2 groups coming in, and he'll see more than 1,000 pastors will come to Refuge, is what it's called, a safe place. They'll come to Refuge this year, and they will get refreshed and healed by God while they're there. And one of those pastors was your pastor. And Brian called me when I was at probably the roughest time that I'd ever been in my life. I was preaching on this stage, but in the back of my mind was thinking, how do I get out of doing this? Because of some betrayal that had happened in my life, some very, very hard moments. I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. In fact, I didn't think I didn't want to do this. I thought, I can't do this anymore. Can't do it. Can't go through that level of pain again. Can't go through that level of disappointment again. And I was ready to quit. And about 2 months into that journey, Brian had found out about it. He's a great friend, and great friends call people to speak life over them. And he called me and he said, hey man, I know what you're going through. He had called me early on anyway, but he was calling to check in. He said, I know what you're going through, and I got some news for you. I just paid for you to come to Montana in a couple weeks. He's like, all you got to do is get there. Everything's paid for. Everything's there. He said, if you need me to call your staff and tell them or whatever. And he said, here's the deal. He said, if you don't come, I'm going to fly to Charleston myself, and I'm going to kick your butt. And actually, he didn't say butt, Connie. He said another word. And Brian, I think Brian might be on steroids. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do with that. So I went to Montana. And it was in Montana that sitting around a fire in seriously the darkest season of my entire life, a guy I didn't really know that well had just met, who was another pastor, another in ministry at another part of the country, listened to my story and looked at me and said, what happened to you should never happen to anybody, and you didn't deserve it. And it was the first moment where anybody had spoken those words to me. Everybody had spoken all kinds of words. They'd asked all kinds of questions. They had said, what did you do to cause this? What was it your fault? Like all those kind of things. But I just needed somebody to look and say, you didn't deserve it. Nobody deserves to be treated the way you were treated. And that traces back to Brian in a time where he said, what could God do with this stuff? I got so much stuff. What could God do with it if I was willing to let it go? And I want to ask you, what could God do with your stuff if you were willing to be the one that God has called you to be to someone in their darkest moment? It might would look like those of you who do give to Freedom Church, not just tip. I'm talking about really give to Freedom Church and make this place go. It might be like the fact that Charlie got to pray with a fifth grader last week who asked Jesus to save them. That's a pretty big deal. It might look like the dozens of encouragements that happen over in the encouragement suite over here that we were able to build because someone's willing to sit down with a couple who's almost about to get divorced. And they just need someone to look at them and tell them, you can make it, and we can help you. It might be someone right now in this place who will look back on this day and go, you know what? That was the day I decided to have a purpose to my life. That was the day I decided to tell my stuff that I was the master. In fact, I want you all to do this. I want you to say, stuff, follow me as I follow Christ. We say that about people all the time. But what if we were to tell our stuff, follow me as I follow Christ? You're going to submit to the will of God, stuff. You're going to submit to my will because I'm in charge. And so that might mean looking like today might be the day you're like, hey, well, you know what? Today's going to be the first day I ever tithe. I'm going to tithe. It's going to be hard. It's not going to feel right, but I'm going to go to the boxes because they've already passed the plates. I'm going to go to the boxes. I'm going to go online, and I'm going to tithe. 10% of what I make is going to go to support the local church, and you're going to be obedient today. It might be, crazy story, it might be giving something away. You might need to go, you know what? This thing has become too important to me. I take care of this, and it's paid off, and I'm going to give it away. It's too important to me. You think that's crazy. Let me tell you a quick story. I know I'm over time, but it's okay. I'm always over time. And so a friend of mine was at a gas station, and he was getting out of the gas station, and he's a little more fashion-minded, like shoes, like jeans, that kind of stuff. And so he doesn't hunt and fish and that kind of stuff. He puts his money into places that last, like Jordans. And so he had a new pair of jeans. He had a new pair of jeans that he really liked. And he was like, man, I've been saving up for these jeans. I really like these jeans. And so he was walking, and as he was walking, a guy looks at him and goes, man, I like those jeans. And he's like, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And he's like, yeah, that's why I wanted these jeans. I wanted somebody to notice I had these jeans. I like these jeans, So he's in to go to pay for something, get a Coke or whatever inside, and he's going to pay. And he said the Spirit of God, like he's never heard before, was like, hey, you love those jeans too much. He's like, but God, they are good jeans. I mean, right? And God was like, you need to give those jeans to that guy. He's like, God, that's weird. That's weird, man. That's weird stuff. Like, you don't walk up to some dude at a gas station and give him your jeans. That's just not normal. And God was like, today you do. You're going to do it. So like most guys, he went and like reached under the seats in his car, and he had a pair of gym shorts. And so he went into the bathroom at the gas station in Chelsea boots and jeans, and came out in Chelsea boots and shorts with jeans folded up. Walked over to the guy, and he was praying. He said he was praying like, I hope he's already left. I hope he's already left. I hope he's already left. I don't know, man. And he gets to him. He sees he's still pumping his gas, and he goes over to him. He's like, man, dude, this is going to seem so weird, but I'm a Christian, and I felt like, God, when you said that you like those jeans, that maybe you just needed to have like a good day, and I felt like God told me to give you these jeans. The guy was like, what? You gonna give me those jeans, man? Those are good jeans. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna give you these jeans. He's like, looked at his size. He's like, they're my size. He's like, oh man, I thought we looked about the same size, but they're your jeans now. He said, made this guy's day. But most of all, it made him give away an idol. And so I just wonder today if there's maybe something that maybe you need to sell. Maybe Facebook Marketplace is going to just light up this afternoon and during response time, because you can't afford that boat and be generous. You can't afford those clothes that you have and be generous. And so there's going to be some decisions. Our stuff is submitting to us. Maybe you just need to decide that I'm going to go to the cross and I'm going to repent because I have let my stuff lead me. Maybe go to the candles. I'm going to light a candle because I'm going to signify that I've let some dark things come into my life because of my obsession with stuff. Maybe just to go pray with someone, take communion together as a family, and just dedicate. Like, we're going to give our stuff over to God. And whatever that looks like, that's what my life will look like. What if we all did that? What if we all did that? I think it'd make a huge difference in the kingdom of God. God, would you allow our stuff not to be perverted, but to be put at the cross, to be made into the image and likeness, the imago Dei, that it would submit to you. God, let us enjoy our stuff, be blessed by our stuff, have abundant life because of the things that you allow us to have. But most of all, let us sit in this time right now and make sure that we have given you our hearts. We want our hearts to be big and full and overflowing for you in Jesus' name. Amen.